The following podcast is an exclusive presentation of Project Entertainment Network.
Hey folks, Brian Keene here. You know, summer's over. We're entering the fall and then the winter. Halloween's coming up, Thanksgiving, and then of course the holiday shopping season. Speaking of the holiday shopping season, let me tell you about subculturecorsets.com. They've got everything you need for everyone on your list for this holiday season. Clothing, accessories, gifts, books, you name it, they've got it. They sponsor every show on the Project Entertainment Network, including this one. So please give them your business. Visit subculturecorsets.com.
Project Entertainment Network presents My Favorite Story, an anthology featuring short fiction written by the hosts of the Project Entertainment Network podcasts, with
Mary San Giovanni and Brian Keene from The Horror Show,
Chuck Border, Aaron Sweet, El Mahore, and Armand Rosamilia of the Mando Method,
Jeannie Engel of Origins,
Bizung's Mr. Frank,
Tom Clark from Necrocast, It On,
It Cooks, Amber Fallon,
Three Guys with Beards, Christopher Golden, Jim Moore and Jonathan Mabry,
The Buttercup of Doom, Kelly Owen,
Matters of Faith's Jay Wilburn,
John Urbansic of Eight Stains.
My Favorite Story, a podcast author anthology from Project Entertainment Network, available on Kindle, Nook, and soon in paperback from the Project Entertainment Network store.
There shall come a podcast like no other. Defenders Dialogue with Brian Keene and Christopher Golden. Marvel Comics' original superhero non-team convenes once again. The Incredible Hulk, the Savage Sub-Mariner, the Master of the Mystic Arts, Doctor Strange, and a dynamic supporting cast of Marvel superheroes battle against evil as the Defenders. Without further ado, true believers, here's your hosts, Brian Keene and Christopher Golden. Excelsior!
And welcome back once again, true believers, to Defenders Dialogue. I'm Brian Keene.
And I'm Christopher Golden. And Brian, Excelsior to you, my friend.
Excelsior to you, true believer. Today we are still in the middle of Ed Hannigan's godforsaken Tunnel World saga. We're going to start with issue 83, and we're going to go to however many issues Chris can tolerate. I'm not sure how far ahead you've read.
Well, actually, Brian, I'm glad to say that although some of the things that I don't really like about Hannigan's run do continue, issue 83 concludes the Tunnel World saga.
Yes, it does. Now, a brief recap for our listeners, in case you've been having trouble just comprehending what has gone before. Doctor Strange, Prince Namor, and Hulk returned to Tunnel World. So we have the reunion of the original Defenders, where the Buzzard King Ytitneden, did we ever agree how to pronounce his name?
It doesn't matter.
Let's go with Ytitneden.
Sure.
Who works for the Unnameable, which, as you'll remember, the Unnameable is an unseen, unnamed menace that has been lurking in the background of the pages of the Defenders for close to 15 issues now. And we still haven't encountered this person. But Ytitneden works for the Unnameable. And Doctor Strange has decimated the ranks of Ytitneden's army. Unfortunately, the Hulk, who was possessed by Ytitneden's forces, has also been captured by Doctor Strange and placed inside the Orb of Omenin. Meanwhile, the Sub-Mariner, along with Arioka, the guy with wings sprouting out of his head, have pressed their attack into Ytitneden's castle, where they knocked out Ytitneden, saved Doctor Strange, saved Tunnel World, or so they thought. But the problem is, now the Unnameable, the invisible enemy whose influence is spreading throughout the Tunnel World dimension, remains a deadly threat. And thus we come to End of the Tunnel, written by Ed Hannigan, layouts by Don Perlin, finishes by Joe Senna.
You know, Brian, I'm so glad that you went through that recap because it means that we don't really have to talk too much about this issue.
That's right.
So I'm just going to go through the beginning of this very quickly, folks, this issue. So basically, Doctor Strange, in the aftermath of the last few issues where we have kind of sped through them, To our eternal grief and despair, Zooks, the strange sorcerer from this world and Doctor Strange's ally, has died. He's been killed by buzzard-headed Ytitnadon, if that's what we're calling him.
I think that's good enough. Actually, you know what? It occurs to me, Chris, we have a guest lurking in the background of this week's show. Listeners to my podcast, The Horror Show with Brian Keene, of course, know him as my 10-year-old son, Dungeonmaster 77.1. Now he's sitting here listening to this nonsense. Now, Dungeonmaster, you're familiar with the Defenders. You like the Hulk. You like Doctor Strange. You like Valkyrie. What do you think of the name Ytitnadon for a bad guy? Is that a good name or a bad name?
I'd say make it sound a little more menacing.
He says make it sound a little more menacing, Ed Hannigan.
There you go. Yeah.
So even a 10-year-old.
Yeah, it doesn't really strike fear into the hearts of readers. So basically, the Hulk has had the true name of the unnameable. Now, this is important, Brian, when we get to the end of this story in this issue. The Hulk has had the true name of the unnameable implanted in his brain by the Shmoo a number of issues ago.
Right.
And as a result, he is enslaved by Ytitnadon, set against the Defenders, and he is now trapped inside the Orb of Omemnon, which belonged to Zooks the Sorcerer, who is now dead. Doctor Strange has trapped him in order to not have to fight him, okay?
Right.
So let's sort of keep that in mind. We're going to come back to that, folks. And I think, Brian, I don't want to spend a lot of time, as you know, on the inanities of the plot as it unfolds. So let's just skip ahead to this little brief interlude with Valkyrie and Hellcat.
And Mutant Force. Don't forget about them.
And Mutant Force, yes. Go ahead on Mutant Force, my friend.
Yeah, as I said, Mutant Force, unfortunately, this is not the last time we will see them in the pages of the Avengers. They show up for a very important anniversary issue. But they are currently being interrogated by the government and, in fact, cooperating with the government. The government is asking them all kinds of questions about the Mandrill. And then one of the government agents cuts a mysterious deal with them, says that the courts may go light on them if they are willing to do something for the government. I wonder, could this tie into the government's case against Kyle Richmond, a.k.a. Nighthawk?
It certainly is implied. Anyway, so then we have Valkyrie and Hellcat out in their civilian guises, out for a girls' day out, and there's a bank robbery in progress, of course. And they go out to stop it, Brian. And what we discover is that Patsy Walker leaps into action without her suit. And Valkyrie notes that she's never seen Patsy in action without the Hellcat suit before, and she thought that she acquired her abilities from the costume. And it seems now that Patsy has these abilities without the costume.
Yes.
Then we find out that they've been robbed. We go back to Nighthawk talking to his attorney, again trying to get out of this legal trouble that he's in.
With not just one, but three alphabet agencies, the Securities and Exchange Commission, the Internal Revenue Service, and now the Federal Bureau of Investigation.
Exactly. And if only the wealthy people of today, outside of comics, would garner the attention of those agencies. But in any case, remarkably, Brian, for a comic book that has spent so many issues on this Tunnel World saga, not once but twice sending our heroes to Tunnel World, and dealing with the buildup to this situation, I'm going to wrap this up pretty quickly by saying Doctor Strange and Namor go inside a gigantic manifestation of the Hulk's brain. Yes, I just said that.
Yes.
A gigantic manifestation of the Hulk's brain. They fly into its eyeball find themselves battling villains the Hulk has battled in the past inside the Hulk's brain, where
Right.
Doctor Strange finds the one spot in the Hulk's brain that contains the knowledge of the identity of the unnameable, the actual name of the unnameable. Upon destroying that tiny bit of the Hulk's brain that contains that information, it's over.
Yes. I just counted the pages. It takes 5 pages for that to happen. This whole big long plot line that started with, I guess Eddie Hannigan's first issue on the book. The whole unnameable thing is over that quickly. And I can only guess. You talked in last week's episode about the blowback they were starting to get on the letters pages. I can only guess that editorial took note and said, all right, you got to wrap this up. You have one more issue. Wrap it up.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just what it feels like.
It does feel that way. And just to be clear to the 3 people who listen to this podcast,
Plus everyone at the Oklahoma City airport.
Yes, and those guys. We never meet the unnameable,
Nope.
find out the identity or the name of the unnameable, and to my knowledge, Brian, the unnameable is never mentioned again.
The unnameable has never been used. Not even Matt Fraction or Brian Michael Bendis, who have made careers of picking up these little crumbs of yesteryear, have ever brought the unnameable back. And to that, they deserve kudos.
Yes, and I'm about to give you, my friend, a gift that you will really appreciate. Because I know that you are reading collections and not the floppy issues that actually have the letters pages.
I am. I'm reading Essential Defenders Volume 4. In fact, Dungeonmaster is sitting here next to me flipping through it while you and I are talking, so I don't get the ads or the letters pages.
Well, I am going to read you the short note from the editor at the top of the letters page right here.
Okay.
It says, "Here we go again, gang. Whereas many of you have been pleased with recent Defenders storylines, there are those who have not. This is especially true in regard to the 2-part Omega tale. Some readers thought, etc., etc., etc." Let's see here. Oh, I'm sorry. I've missed it. I thought this was the note where they basically, maybe that was last episode we talked about, the note where they take...
the Steve Gerber thing?
No, where they talked about how glad they were that the Tunnel World saga was at an end. This is a note from the editor about the Omega saga, in which Cat Ironwood had written a very long letter ripping that apart. So we'll skip that because that was not the letter I was thinking it was. I thought it was the one where they basically were so relieved that the Tunnel World saga was over. Anyway, no one is more relieved than I am that even though Ed Hannigan is still in the book, we can move on from the Tunnel World saga to issue 84, which begins a strange team-up with one of the biggest movie stars of all time.
Wakanda forever.
Exactly. But just don't ask Chadwick Boseman to do that salute. It seems he's getting a little tired of it.
He is. So yes, Defenders 84, titled Battle Royale. It's a denouement to that whole Tunnel World mess. Hannigan, again, writing breakdowns by Don Perlin. And I don't know Tex Blaisdell. Do you know Tex Blaisdell?
No, this is the first time I remember encountering the name, but the finishes are by, yeah.
Whoever Tex Blaisdell is, I'm a big fan of Don Perlin's work. We said on last week's show, as an artist, he has the second longest run on the book, I think beaten only by Sal Buscema. His art is synonymous with the Defenders, but whoever Tex Blaisdell is, I don't like what he does with Perlin's breakdowns here.
Yeah, it's not great, but I will say that it is just a pleasure to read a Defenders story that is neither about the Mandrill nor about Tunnel World.
That's true. That's true. We open in Atlantis, where Doctor Strange and Namor and Hulk have returned. And there's a big party going on, big feast, but Namor is sulking. He's sitting there in his throne pouting. And, Doctor Strange says, hey, what's going on with you? Why are you so glum, chum? And to Hannigan's credit, we get some real characterization here from Namor. Namor admits that he's worried about the Hulk. He's worried about the friend. He says, although the green-skinned one and I have had our differences in the past, I don't wish to see him die.
Yeah, it's interesting. I also like the fact that they're really working at this moment in the series. Again, it's the time when the TV series of The Incredible Hulk is very popular. We're in 1980 now, and so in the comics, in the Defenders, they're really working the shift back and forth between Banner and Hulk a lot.
Right.
So in the early days of the Defenders, you never saw Banner. I mean, almost never saw Banner, but because...
The only time we saw him was when the emissaries of evil were gonna blow up New York, and Doctor Strange reverted Hulk back into Banner. Or no, Clea did, actually.
Right.
To get him to defuse the gamma bomb.
Right, and now that the TV series is popular, and because of the effects involved in painting Lou Ferrigno green, they used Bill Bixby as Banner much more than they used the Hulk. We're seeing Banner a lot because all of a sudden he's an interesting character to people watching television and buying comics that have the Hulk on the front cover. So,
right.
So in any case, the Hulk is in some kind of coma in Atlantis. And then he transforms back into Dr. Banner. And basically, they're just waiting for him to recover from Doctor Strange using magic to excise the name of the unnameable from the Hulk's brain. And then they're interrupted. Doctor Strange and Namor are interrupted by one of Namor's servants, Lord Vashti, who tells him that there is a crisis on land unfolding. There's a meeting going on, Brian, between delegates from Atlantis and people from Wakanda.
Right. Now, Dungeonmaster, reading over my shoulder, just pointed to the delegates from Atlantis and whispered, "Who is that?" So now you know, those are delegates from Atlantis, which Prince Namor is in charge of.
Who's that dude?
That's a dude from Wakanda.
Yep.
And he's getting beaten up.
And he's getting beaten up. See, Dungeon Master on spot with the commentary. We can let him guest host the show, Chris.
Exactly. So basically, they're trying to do some kind of a deal. They're on a place called Kyber Island, a protectorate of Wakanda, and basically they're trying to make a deal that is a sort of side deal, where let's see, the Wakandans are trying to sell the Atlanteans something that King T'Challa, a.k.a. the Black Panther, would not appreciate. And then the Black Panther, of course, arrives and attacks them, interrupting the deal in progress.
Right. Now, I got to say, for all of Hannigan's flaws early on with characterization of the Defenders, I feel that he really gets T'Challa. I like the way he writes Black Panther.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm for it. In this era, and by the way, we'll get to it in a minute and we'll point it out. There is something I thought really fascinating about this issue, but we'll get to that in a moment. So Black Panther shows up with some of his royal military forces, and then he steals the air car belonging to the Atlantean smugglers or whoever they were, and he goes after them. He's chasing them, trying to catch up with them. And what he encounters underwater, Brian, is the super dreadnought of the Submariner's Royal Navy, the Royal Navy of Atlantis.
Right.
Yeah. Go ahead.
At that moment, we go back to Atlantis, speaking of which. And, the Atlanteans are telling Namor, they see this as some kind of provocative action on the part of Wakanda. Keep in mind, in the Marvel Universe, Atlantis is a recognized nation. They have a United Nations delegate.
Right.
They have embassies in New York, as is, of course, Wakanda. They're both fictional nations that exist in the Marvel Universe, but it's just like Russia or America or any other nation. So what we're looking at here is two nuclear-powered nations.
Exactly.
Who are being driven towards action against each other over what is basically one of those giant Marvel Comics misunderstandings between heroes.
Yep. So let's say this: we have a situation where Bruce Banner has woken up from his coma. The Atlanteans, in order to prevent him from trashing the inside of their super dreadnought and potentially scuttling the whole thing, give him an injection of something to knock him out so that he won't turn into the Hulk. Doctor Strange has left and gone home and been reunited with Clea, Valkyrie, and Hellcat, leaving the Sub-Mariner, notoriously ill-tempered Sub-Mariner, by himself on board the super dreadnought, where Black Panther has now come aboard. Now, Black Panther feels like his people have been attacked. Sub-Mariner doesn't know what went on the mainland or on Kyber Island, so he thinks that the Black Panther is attacking him. And so, of course, they fight.
Right.
There's a fight on board this thing. Not to take too much time with it, but the Black Panther is eluding him on board the ship and encounters the unconscious Bruce Banner. And naturally, if you're a guy who's trapped on board an enemy vessel, you need a distraction. And what better distraction, Brian, than
the Incredible Hulk?
than the Incredible Hulk.
So Black Panther starts slapping the unconscious Bruce Banner across the face to get him to wake up. Wake up he does, and we get Hulk is here. Hulk remembers blue men trying to make Hulk sleep, but Hulk doesn't want to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Hulk wants to smash.
Mm-hmm. So Hulk smashes Namor out of the ship. Black Panther escapes through the same hole. We get U.S. President Jimmy Carter making an appearance on the news in this comic. He was still president at this point. And that year he would lose to Ronald Reagan in the election. Right. Then we see that the Hulk, is back with the world is on the brink of nuclear war. Namor has been reunited with the Hulk. We see that Wakanda. Okay, so this is the key thing.
Hang on 1 second. There's one fun bit there. You mentioned the world is on the brink of war, and we see the American forces in Bermuda at the Air Force Base. We see the Kremlin, aiming missiles at both the U.S. and China. But we go to Fifth Avenue, New York, where somebody is reading the New York Daily News.
Oh, yeah.
And the headline is, now keep in mind, this is the 1970s. World on brink of nuclear war. Huh. That Rupert Murdoch will do anything to sell papers.
Yeah, there you go. Almost 40 years ago, folks, Rupert Murdoch would still do anything to sell papers. So Namor starts talking to the Hulk. The Hulk is pissed, and as we all know, what happens when the Hulk is pissed is he takes off. So he leaps with his extraordinary power out of the ocean into the air, and because of the nuclear tension going on in Wakanda, the military there believe that Atlantis has just fired a nuclear missile. They mistake the Hulk's leaping out of the ocean for a nuke on target for Wakanda, and they fire a nuclear missile in return.
That's right.
As soon as the Black Panther realizes that this has happened, he calls Namor and warns him that this has happened and that the missile's on the way. And Namor is able to get there in time to at least divert the weapon so it hits the uninhabited Kyber Island. And there is a nuclear explosion. A nuclear explosion.
Kyber Island is destroyed.
Now, I will say this, Brian. One thing that's really interesting is that anybody who's read Marvel Comics in the last 15 to 20 years will know that the Black Panther and the Sub-Mariner hate each other.
Oh yeah.
As dueling monarchs, they are legendary for having this animosity between them. But what you realize going forward in the next couple issues is this is where it starts. Prior to this issue of the Defenders, that was not a thing in Marvel Universe.
Right. They had crossed paths in issues of the Fantastic Four, but there wasn't that animosity between them. That animosity, you're right, springs forth here in the pages of the Defenders.
Yeah.
And we end with, T'Challa hoping for peace and Namor in watching the explosion go off over Kyber Island, hoping for the same thing, but also reminding himself that Wakanda is still holding his Atlantean guys prisoner.
Right.
And that he needs to go negotiate their release, and if they don't, then he and T'Challa are destined to clash again.
Yeah. Yeah, really interesting. Now, before we move on to the next issue, here I just discovered on the letters page here is the thing that I was looking for.
Okay.
This is the note from editor, presumably either from editor Al Milgrom or assistant editor Joe Duffy. Whew. Aren't you glad all that Tunnel World stuff is over? Sure, it was great fun for a while, but the whole thing all caps, get out of hand. And that symbolism, what was he trying to say anyway? Nice to see the original Defenders back together again, of course, but we miss Val, Hellcat, Nighty, etc. Well, before Marveldom Assembled takes pen in hand to say never again, all caps, consider, it's not every day someone writes a story where the villain is never seen, says not a word, and whose very name is kept secret. And who never will again. So there. All in all, though, we think there was a lot to the epic, and we hoped you all enjoyed it for what it was.
Wow. Just threw Hannigan under the bus while he's still on the book.
Yeah. I mean, he writes after this, he still has 7 issues to go on this book. And I think actually there's a reference to Al here. So I'm assuming, and I don't want to say stay for a fact, but I'm assuming that assistant editor Mary Jo Duffy wrote that because there's a reference in parentheses to Al Milgrom. But
right.
Wow. I mean, completely throwing shade and throwing Hannigan under the bus. I just couldn't believe, that it's not every day you see this, and you never will again.
No, that's insane. That's insane.
And we hope you enjoyed it for what it was. I mean, wow. I got to that, and I just couldn't believe it. Anyway.
So yes, Defenders 85 came out July of 1980. We see that Black Panther is indeed still in the book. In fact, this is the issue when he joins the team. And we open outside the Wakandan consulate. The news is saying that Black Panther is coming there today. And Hellcat has decided that she needs to inform him about everything the Defenders learned about the Mandrill. Unfortunately, she can't get into the consulate because there's protesters and demonstrators surrounding it.
Right. And we should say that what she's there to tell him is that they've learned that some of the activities of the Mandrill have led to information that could affect the security of Wakanda.
Right.
Which is why she wants to do that. And also, I want to point out that in Hellcat's thought balloon, she thinks of Mandrill as our arch foe. I mean,
Hellcat has never met the Headman or Nebula on the Celestial Man.
Wow, that the Mandrill would be considered by Ed Hannigan to be the Defender's arch foe. But in any case, there is a crowd after the nuclear situation last issue. There's a crowd of protesters outside the Wakandan consulate, and Hellcat is trying to figure out how she's going to get in to talk to Black Panther.
Right. And in true Hellcat fashion, and again, keep in mind, I do not care for Hellcat until J.M. DeMatteis begins writing her. She just walks up to the back and has a gun drawn on her by Secret Service, and or excuse me, not Secret Service, a SHIELD agent, and she just flashes her Avengers identification card, and the SHIELD agent is not impressed and decides he's going to take her in for questioning. So Hellcat basically beats the crap out of the SHIELD agent and runs away.
Well, she tries to run away. She shoots out her cat claw thing that she swings from, and ends up crashing through a window into the Wakandan consulate, coincidentally and conveniently, landing right in front of King T'Challa, the Black Panther.
Right.
So then we have this outside, things are going crazy. They're like, oh, we have to stop the terrorist, meaning Hellcat. The police come to the door, and Black Panther himself answers the door. And what I love is the thought balloon from one of the riot police who thinks, wow, it's the Panther himself, a real king. Wait till I tell my wife.
Well, I like the fact that T'Challa is answering the door himself at the Wakandan consulate.
In costume.
They can't afford a doorman or a butler.
Yeah, well, then we cut away to the ongoing and incredibly boring, like, talk about stretching a plot thread until it snaps. Kyle Richmond and his lawyer. It's like, I feel like since issue 1 of Defenders, Kyle Richmond and his lawyer have been sitting in an office. I know that's not true, but it feels that way at this point. It feels
that way. And keep in mind, this is the summer of 1980. Your primary readers at this point from Marvel. Now, these days, of course, it's a much older demographic. But back then, it's college kids and kids home from school for the summer, and you ride your bike to 7-Eleven, and you buy an issue of Defenders, and you're watching two dudes talk legal proceedings and the law. That's exciting,
right? Yeah, no, it's incredibly boring. Kyle is talking about how they're going through each division of his company, searching for any hint of mismanagement, and so far they're proving that the company is squeaky clean, even though the government is determined to nail him to the wall. And then they turn on the TV somehow, or the TV's on, and they see the scene where Hellcat smashes through into the Wakandan consulate, and Kyle gets upset and turns it off because he can't be lured, he can't be tempted to get involved in that whole process.
Right. We then come to my favorite part of this issue. Again, I'm a sucker for good characterization. We have the Hulk, who is actually swimming across the Atlantic Ocean. And we have Namor and his Atlanteans following him in one of their submersible craft. And, the Atlanteans ask Prince Namor, should we capture him? And Namor says, no, I feel responsible for the Hulk. I promised Dr. Strange I would shelter him. I want to help him regain his trust. So they surface and splash the Hulk with a wave, which immediately, pisses the Hulk off. Why is Wave attacking Hulk? Hulk will smash Wave for this. And then Namor emerges, and what we have here is some really great dialogue between Namor and the Submariner. They're still jerks to each other, but they're jerks that are genuinely trying to work out their friendship.
Right. Yeah, they're trying to be. They know that they're allies, even though they're assholes by nature. So Namor is concerned that Hulk won't be able to swim all the way across the Atlantic, so he offers Hulk a ride, basically.
Right. I should point out at this point, Chris, I know you're reading single issues. I'm reading from the Essentials, but at this point, Ed Hannigan has bored Dungeonmaster to the point where he has run off to his room to play with his Marvel action figures rather than listen to this tribe.
The interesting thing is that I think that Ed Hannigan would have had that effect. I would think that Dungeonmaster 77.1 should rewrite these issues himself, and we would get something better.
Now you've got his attention. He's just come running in from his room. What do you have to say to that?
I think that's awesome, and I would rewrite that.
You think that's awesome? Yeah. When Dungeonmaster was 4, he actually got to pitch the publisher of DC Comics, Dan Didio, a comic book. For real. Dan didn't realize that it was my son because it was a big group conference call. And it's Keith Giffen, myself, Jeff Lemire, others on the line. And Dan says, shout out what characters you want. And Dungeonmaster, because he's my son, he has a deep knowledge of all these characters. He's in the background. He shouts out Buona Beast. Do you remember Buona Beast from DC Comics?
I have a vague recollection of Buona Beast, yeah.
His power was he could grab animals and fuse them to his body so he could have like gorilla arms or cheetah claws. Dungeonmaster, 4 years old, shouts out Buona Beast because he'd seen him on an episode of Batman Brave and the Bold. And Dan Didio went for it. And then Keith Giffen had to explain that was Keene's 4-year-old son, Dan. So he's been involved more in comics by age 10 than most kids. All right, go play, buddy.
Oh my God.
So yes,
I would read that. I would read Dungeon Master's Buona Beast comic.
I would too. Hulk and Namor arrive at Defenders headquarters, which is of course Doctor Strange's Sanctum Sanctorum, and they come inside and they find Clay and Hellcat and Valkyrie and Doctor Strange and Black Panther.
Now, we're in a situation where these two guys are still in a bit of a nuclear standoff with one another, and they find themselves in the same room. And Namor comes in to find Black Panther essentially working with the Defenders.
Right, a team that he helped found.
Right. They start arguing, and Doctor Strange walks in and says, "This is my home, my haven, and I will brook no violent outbursts. I ask that you put aside your differences while you stay here." And Namor basically says, "Oh no, I'm not going for that." And he storms out, as he's the master of doing, storming out of things. So basically Doctor Strange is like, Black Panther says, "I'm sorry for causing that problem." And Doctor Strange is like, "Nope, consider it forgotten." So basically then they just move on. They're just, Namor's had a tantrum, and they're used to Namor's tantrums, and they're done with him.
Right. So then the Defenders, which no longer include Namor, but include Black Panther as his replacement, decide to go into final battle against the Mandrill. We hope. They don't know where his whereabouts, but Panther has evidence that he is a prime customer for the stolen goods smuggled out of Wakanda, and they have a location for that. And they arrive there, and they find the Mandrill's women warriors. Remember his all-female army.
Exactly. So they find them getting off of what appears to be a rickety old airplane that's supposed to be smuggling these stolen goods from Wakanda. But when they get on board, or at least when the Panther and Hellcat get on board, which, by the way, I like this cat team-up, Black Panther and Hellcat.
Yeah.
They find that actually it's not what it appears to be from the outside. It's a high-tech sort of jet thing that the Mandrill has at his disposal somehow. And it takes off, and the Black Panther is bound by some kind of robotic arms. And Valkyrie and Clea are pursuing this thing on board Aragorn, Brian.
Right.
So they try to attack
I'm sorry,
it.
I was skipping ahead in the book to count how many issues till J.M. DeMatteis comes on. I'm back now. So yeah, Panther's got this thing. Hellcat's trying to get it off of him, and then the Mandrill appears and says, it's connected to a powerful bomb. If you free him, the bomb goes off.
Right. And again, by the way, I want to interrupt you and say that I also can't wait to start with the DeMatteis stuff. But these issues are fun. I mean, these are fun issues. They're certainly so much better than the Tunnel World stuff. In any case, what we have is that Valkyrie, falls off the Aragorn. Clea rides down with Aragorn to save her.
And it's cool to see Clea riding Aragorn like that.
Yeah, exactly. I'd like to have seen more of her. So we, I like this bit, Brian. The Hulk and Doctor Strange see that Clea and Valkyrie cannot help Black Panther and Hellcat, who are on board this thing that's going to explode when it hits a giant propane storage facility in eastern New Jersey.
Right.
And the Hulk and Doctor Strange decide that the way to prevent that from happening is for the Hulk to punch the thing through the sky so it doesn't hit the propane facility, even though Hellcat and Black Panther are on board.
Yes, he punches it into the river.
Yes, he punches it into the river, And
they managed to free Black Panther because, of course, the water flooding the airplane shorts out the bomb and the trap that was holding the Panther. But then the plane blows up anyway. It's all very convoluted. But yeah, as the rolling waters of the Hudson River settle, we have Hellcat, Panther, and Doctor Strange emerging on shore to meet the Hulk, Clea, Valkyrie, and Aragorn.
Yeah, so now we have, interestingly, I think that these are, for all intents and purposes, these 6 characters are currently the Defenders.
Right.
Black Panther, Hellcat, Doctor Strange, Valkyrie, Hulk, and Clea. Which I think is an interesting lineup. I wish they had sort of done more with. That somebody other than Ed Hannigan had done something with. Okay. We forge ahead.
Are we done for the day?
What's that?
Are we done for the day, do you think?
No, we'll do one more.
Yeah?
We forge ahead to Quiet Riot in Times Square, which, by the way, I want to point out that Black Panther, in those days, folks, the upper left-hand box on Marvel Comics would have images of just the headshots of the characters in the book. And in 84 and 86, Black Panther is in that box with Hellcat, Valkyrie, and Hulk.
That's right.
So,
right. So here we are, August 1980, classic Bronze Age Marvel cover. There's no credit on that cover. I'm seeing hints of George Perez, maybe.
I have no idea.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, but
I'm
it's
sure
the
there's
Hulk.
a couple listeners out there that can correct me on it. Rich Buckler, I think, and perhaps George Perez, the two of them together. Or actually, here, I found the credit. I was partially right. It's Rich Buckler and Al Milgrom did this cover.
Okay.
And yeah, you have the Hulk, Hellcat, Black Panther, and Valkyrie in the midst of a riot in Times Square. And of course, as you said, quiet riot in Times Square. It has nothing to do with the band. Although teenage Brian probably hoped so, because I was a huge Quiet Riot fan.
I think Quiet Riot came along a few years after.
They came along 83.
83, there you go.
Yep, 83.
I'm teenage Chris unfortunately once participated in a battle of the bands or some kind of talent show in which my band performed Come On Feel the Noise, on which I did not acquit myself well.
Please tell me there's video footage of this.
Thankfully, no.
No?
Thankfully, no. Anyway, this issue written by Ed Hannigan, penciled by Don Perlin, and inked by legendary artist Pablo Marcus.
Yes.
A vast improvement over the inks of the guy, Tex, what's his name, that we were talking about the other day, or earlier. Anyway, so we begin with Valkyrie riding Aragorn. We find out that 3 nights have passed since the stolen Wakanda devices have not been recovered. It's basically dawn in New York. Valkyrie's returning to Kyle Richmond's building now. They're not on the Staten Island ranch any longer, Brian, because that was destroyed by Fool Killer. They are residing at the moment in an office tower owned by Kyle Richmond.
Right. We then get some foreshadowing here. Not so much during Hannigan's remaining run, but it will be important during a portion of J.M. DeMatteis's run. We have Valkyrie kind of recapping her origins, her place in the world, the fact that she still inhabits the body of Earthling Barbara Norris, etc. But yes, they return. We have Kyle and his lawyer talking about plea bargains and all kinds of other boring stuff. And then Hellcat arrives with Black Panther. And this is, of course, the first meeting between Nighthawk and Black Panther. Now, something interesting about this I want to touch on. Of course, you and I know Nighthawk as Kyle Richmond, the white guy.
Right.
Years later, J. Michael Straczynski would reinvent the Squadron Supreme from Marvel as sort of an adult comic. And his Kyle Richmond was basically based on T'Challa, the Black Panther, if the Black Panther had been a militant. If he had been more Malcolm X rather than Martin Luther King.
Huh.
And it's actually a fantastic rendition of Nighthawk. I encourage folks to go read it if you can find it. It's really dark and good stuff. But I find this little historic panel here of the Caucasian version of Nighthawk, meeting inarguably one of Marvel's most noble, heroic African American characters. Just a little bit of accidental foreshadowing toward what would come in that case.
Interesting. Yeah. I also liked. We get this point where T'Challa shows them a device that is identical to 2 other devices that have been stolen from Wakanda. And basically what this device is a sound dampener or a sound absorber. And that sounds like it's nothing, but it's actually pretty interesting what happens with it. So it's been stolen. It has repercussions for freedom of speech. There all kinds of other things that they're talking about. But more importantly, when it absorbs sound, which sound is energy, it also has the potential to provide energy. So it could end the energy crisis and all of this kind of stuff if they reproduce it. And that's why T'Challa says it has been stolen and he's so desperate to get it back. There's more to it than that, which we'll find out pretty soon. And then we go, Brian, to the Russian embassy. Although they say the embassy of an Eastern nation, but it's clearly the Russian embassy.
Right.
Where a Peter Lorre looking dude is trying to sell one of these same items. So there are 2 of these items that have been stolen, and the idea is this guy wants to sell one to the east and one to the west to keep the balance of power, because of course that keeps him in business.
Right. We then get a short display of what the device can do. The Russian diplomat, of course, figures out that it has properties of vibranium. Vibranium is, of course, the metal that can only be found in Wakanda. Mm-hmm. The Russian guy explains this, and the Peter Lorre-looking guy decides to double-cross him, kills the Russian, takes both the money he was getting paid and the device, and escapes onto the streets of New York, where he is, bam, in true elf with a gun fashion, hit by a bus.
He's hit by a bus because he can't hear. The bus does not make a sound.
That's right.
So he's in a hurry, and he's using the thing to absorb the sound around him. He's hit by the bus. And then we get, what's that movie, Brian? I think there have been several of them that follows the gun.
The most recent example would be last season of Family Guy. They did an entire half hour with a dollar bill. And
all right, well, there you go.
The dollar, it was shot from the point of view of the dollar bill, and you follow the dollar bill around town. That's what we get here, because then a cab driver picks up the device.
Yeah, the cabbie picks up the device. Now, also, Brian, I want to interrupt for a moment and say, by the way, the cab driver, we see that the Hellcat is there looking for it because she and T'Challa are able to track the device when it's in use, but not when it is not in use. So right. Every time it goes on, they can track it, and then when it goes off, they lose its trail. But in any case, right. I want to take a moment here. I haven't done this in the last few issues because there haven't been that many great ads, and this one probably isn't that great, but you may remember it. In fact, I should take a picture of it and tweet it at you later. This ad for You'll Go Bats for Gregory instead of Gregory. It's GRE-Gory. Big bad vampire bat. Put your finger in his mouth and see what happens when you squeeze him. You can look at his see-through belly and watch the red liquid flow. See if your friends dare stick their fingers between his fangs. This is what passed for horror toys in those days. Anyway, actually, this could be... We then go to... Wait, this could be your tagline, Brian. He's big, he's fearsome, but best of all, he's fun. Anyway.
I think that's more for your Three Guys with Beards co-host, Jim Moore.
That's true.
We go to my favorite part of this issue. Hulk has reverted back to Bruce Banner. And he's sitting there, bemoaning the fact that his other half is a giant rampaging green monster. And Valkyrie is having none of this. She tells him, if you could actually meet the Hulk, you might like him. I like him. And then she says, this depression can't be good for you. And she asks Bruce Banner out on a date to go to the movies. Didn't see this coming.
Yeah, I'm trying to find that scene.
Yeah, it's 3 panels.
Yeah, I got it. I gotcha. Yep.
She says, let's go to a movie. I've not seen one for a long time. And, Banner's like, a movie? You must be joking. What if I turn into the Hulk? Just the action on the screen could trigger the change. And she says, well, we'll see this one, Snow White. It shouldn't be too exciting.
All right, so then we get, that is a great scene, by the way, and it leads to another scene in a bit. But then we get the Mandrill, who basically at this point is Hugh Hefner.
Yeah. He's in a hot tub surrounded by bikini-clad women.
We go back to our cab driver, who is trying to figure out what this device is for. And he lives in a rundown apartment building he's surrounded by loud music and screaming children and the traffic noises from outside and all of this stuff. And then he accidentally stumbles upon the use of this thing, and he finds so much peace that he falls asleep in his bed smoking and takes a nap. And of course, Brian, the building is set on fire.
That's right. But nobody can hear his cries for help. He wakes up engulfed in flames. Nobody can hear his cries for help because the device is still on. He burns. The device rolls down the stairs.
Little kid picks it up.
Yep, little kid picks it up.
And while Black Panther and Hellcat are helping evacuate the people from the burning building, the kid and his mom are leaving. They don't know. They get home, and the kid is pounding the thing against the wall or the door in the house, or the refrigerator, it looks like, actually. And the mother takes it away and discovers what it does, because the kid starts crying, and then the child is silenced. The mother says, I don't believe it. Lewis is still crying, but I can't hear him. Wherever this thing came from, it's dangerous. And then we see her sitting there and she can hear the child crying, and she's not using the device. And this actually I thought was the most interesting thing Hannigan's done on a lot of issues. Just this one little bit where Hellcat and Black Panther are flying over the city in a ship of the Black Panthers, and Hellcat says, golly, there it goes again, activating for 30-second intervals. Why would anyone want to do that? And Black Panther says, perhaps it is someone struggling with his conscience. So basically, the mom doesn't want to hear the kid cry, but she feels so guilty using it to silence the kid's cries instead of actually comforting the kid, that she's turning it on and turning it off, and turning it on and turning it off.
We find out a half hour has passed, and the mom has reached a decision. That half hour of peace and quiet gave her time to do more thinking than she's had in the 4 years since she married her worthless bum of a husband. She decides that her and the kid are going to get on a bus and go to California. While they're on the subway on their way to the bus station, the subway is very, very loud. There's a bunch of guys with a boombox, and so she activates the device. And everybody on the subway train suddenly freaks out, and then a riot begins. It spreads out onto the subway platform. Yep. It spreads up into the streets, and we then segue to the movie theater, where Bruce and Val are legitimately on a date, enjoying each other's company. Jack Norris seems to be all forgotten, as does Betty Ross, and Jarella, and all the other Hulk's loves. Val whispers to Bruce, aren't you glad you came, Bruce? And he says, yes, I haven't felt this relaxed in years. And then all of a sudden, the sound cuts out in the movie theater, and Valkyrie realizes it must be the device the Panther was talking about. The riot sweeps into the theater. Bruce turns into the Hulk, And then, cleverly, we have several panels of action that are done without word balloons, done without sound effects.
Yeah. Yeah, and actually, I think what happens now is kind of interesting. Because they can't hear each other, Black Panther basically hands Hellcat his version of this absorber thing, sound absorber, and he leaps out to distract the Hulk so nobody is hurt in the, none of the people are hurt in the riot. And Hellcat is left to try to figure out what Black Panther intended for her to do. And what she realizes is that the two things being so close to each other, remember, Black Panther says they absorb energy and they have to dispel it somehow.
Right.
So basically, she's got this one that is all the way on, and it's taking all this kind of energy into it. And somehow she realizes that all she needs to do is shut it off, and the other one will overload and explode and then be useless and not a danger to anybody. And that's what happens. And no surprise, once this is all over, the Hulk is pissed because, of course, once again, the people have treated him like he's a monster, and he leaves. And then we have a really weird but interesting one-panel cameo, Brian.
The strangest cameo of all, true believers.
Just randomly.
The Fantastic Four show up.
Well, at least Reed Richards and Sue Richards, the Mr. Fantastic and the Invisible Woman, are just there. And Reed says hello to T'Challa. They're just talking to him, and he says, "From what I heard about recent developments in Wakandan silence technology, I suspected you'd be involved. Don't worry about the crowd. Sue will have it under control in minutes with her force field, and I'll direct traffic from up here." And Sue says, "If we hurry, Reed, we can catch the white sale at Macy's." And Hellcat is pissed.
Yeah.
Because
those grandstanding prima donnas, big deal Fantastic Four stole the limelight from the Defenders.
Exactly.
And that one panel is more. Marvel used Reed and Sue more in that one panel than they have in the last 5 years of Marvel Comics history.
That is true. That is true.
All right. Well, next week, Chris, I'm very excited. Do you know why?
Why is that?
Because one of my favorite Defenders returns next week. Jack Norris himself is back.
That is true. That is true.
And he's like the main Defender in issue 87. So I'm very excited for that.
Yeah, he is back in what turns out to be a really strange issue of the Defenders. And Brian, we have 5 more Ed Hannigan issues to go.
5 more.
So we will attempt, folks, to wrap Ed Hannigan's run up next episode. We will see if we manage it. And if not, you'll have to wait a little bit longer.
That's right. But while you're waiting, if you enjoyed this program, you may enjoy some of our other programs that are available here on the Project Entertainment Network. For example, Chris, along with James Moore and Jonathan Mayberry, hosts a show every week called Three Guys with Beards. I, along with Dungeonmaster 77.1, who you heard earlier, and Mary San Giovanni and Dave Thomas and director Mike Lombardo, host a show called The Horror Show with Brian Keene. Both of those are available wherever you listen to Defenders Dialogue, be it iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, wherever. So we thank the Project Entertainment Network for that. And we also thank our engineer, Tommy Clark. He also has a podcast here on the Project Entertainment Network. That is called the Necrocasticon. It's one of my favorites. So yeah, check out, go to projectentertainmentnetwork.com. Check out some of the other shows here on the network.
All right. Well, Brian, Excelsior, true believers.
Excelsior indeed, true believers.
See you next time on Defenders Dialogue.
Woo!
Do you love comic books and consider yourself a die-hard fan? Then you need to listen to Parlapod. We have news, reviews, and interviews with your favorite pros, all while bringing some serious laughs. New episodes drop every Wednesday in time for New Comic Book Day. Parlapod is available on the Project Entertainment Network, all major podcast outlets, and parlapod.com. Tune in and fuel your fandom with Parlapod.
Three Guys with Beards.
The Project Entertainment Network store, featuring t-shirts, mugs, stickers, These and more from your favorite Project Entertainment Network podcasts.
Ink Stains Scribbler's Rest.
The Horror Show with Brian Keene.
Why not show your loyalty by wearing a cool product from the podcast group and show off to your friends?
It Cooks.
Armcast.
The Mondo Method.
Monster Attack.
Necrocastical.
Go to projectentertainmentnetwork.com and click on the store tab for more details.
The Liars Club podcast.
Pizza.
The Lunch Ladies Book Club.
Matters of Faith.
The Project Entertainment Network store, stacked with stuff from the best podcasts on the internet.
The Curtain Jerkers.
Buttercup of Doom.
www.projectentertainmentnetwork.com.
This has been an exclusive presentation of the Project Entertainment Network.